June 12, 1943, Camp Forest, Tennessee. The summer air is thick with humidity and the scent of pine. Corporal Heinrich Miller, recently captured at the Tunisian front, steps from the transport train onto the gravel yard of Camp Forest. He wipes the sweat from his brow, squinting against the sunlight, the rhythmic clanging of boots on steel tracks echoing in his ears. Around him, dozens of other German POWs shuffle forward, their hands bound and expressions wary. "Keep moving! Schnell!" barks a USMP, voice clipped, while gestures with a rifle. Heinrich's stomach churns, not just from fear, but from days of near starvation and the exhaustion of surrender. The prisoners were prepared for the worst: minimal food, hard labor, and strict confinement. What they do not expect and will soon discover is the surreal normalcy waiting inside the camp gates. Rows of wooden barracks stretch across the compound, flanked by watchtowers bristling with machine guns. Yet despite the threatening appearance, there is a strange orderliness. Camp Forest is alive with activity. Mess tents billow steam, laundry lines flap in the breeze, and American guards move methodically, almost politely, among the prisoners. Heinrich notices small, almost absurd details: a wooden sign painted in block letters, "Mess Hall," and soldiers carrying trays laden with food, the aroma wafting through the air. By midday, Heinrich and his fellow POWs are herded into a large mess hall. The floor creaks beneath their boots, the walls painted a soft green, far from the stench and grime of the front lines. The American cook, Sergeant James "Jim" Caldwell, directs a team of enlisted men serving breakfast. He wears a crisp white apron over his khaki uniform, a stark contrast to the dust-streaked German uniforms of the prisoners. Heinrich watches, incredulous, as trays are filled with sizzling strips of steak, sunny-side-up eggs, fresh bread, and butter. Potatoes and vegetables steam in large kettles. Even coffee, dark and rich, is poured into mugs for the prisoners. The Germans exchange uneasy glances, whispering to each other, disbelief written across their faces. "Ist das richtig?" murmurs one young soldier, gesturing toward the trays. "Is this real?" "Eat up, men. You need it," Sergeant Caldwell calls over the bustle. "Plenty for everyone." There is no sneer, no punishment, only the organized rhythm of the kitchen. Heinrich hesitates, unsure if it is a trick or a trap. Yet the aroma, the sight of steak and eggs, ignites a pang of hunger so acute it overrides skepticism. For the prisoners, this is not merely a meal, it is a psychological shock. Many had endured harsh conditions on the front lines, meager rations of hard bread, thin soup, and occasional canned meat. Others had witnessed comrades scavenge for scraps or subsist on whatever could be found in the ruins of North Africa and Europe. Here, in the heart of Tennessee, food is abundant, hot, and even aesthetically pleasing, a foreign concept for men hardened by battle. Heinrich takes his first bite, the taste rich and unfamiliar. Butter melts on the steak, eggs glisten in the morning light filtering through the windows. Around him, murmurs of astonishment ripple across the hall. Some laugh nervously, some shake their heads, and others eat quickly, as though devouring this reality will somehow make it vanish. Outside, the camp hums with the mechanical rhythm of American military life. Trucks rumble along dirt roads, delivering supplies, and soldiers drill with precision. Inside the mess hall, the German POWs are encountering a dissonant world, one that honors the Geneva Convention not as a suggestion, but as a practiced code. The contrast is stark, the brutal deprivation of the battlefield replaced by structured abundance. Sergeant Caldwell notices Heinrich's hesitation and approaches, offering a friendly nod. "Don't worry, you'll get used to it. Just eat." There is no malice, no ridicule, only the calm efficiency of an army operating far from its own front lines, yet still fully committed to international rules of conduct. Heinrich swallows, tasting both food and disbelief. That first meal becomes a pivotal moment. It is more than nourishment. It is a lesson in perspective, a quiet revelation that the world beyond the front lines operates under different rules. For Heinrich and his fellow POWs, Each bite is accompanied by the creeping realization that the enemy who captured them is also capable of humane treatment, an experience both humbling and disorienting. As the sun climbs higher, the prisoners are escorted to their assigned barracks. The air is warm, punctuated by distant birdsong, and the clatter of kitchen utensils fades behind them. Heinrich pauses briefly to glance back at the mess hall, still reeling from what he has witnessed. Here, at Camp Forest, the war is not just about bullets and battles. It is about endurance, adaptation, and the surprising, sometimes almost surreal, capacity for compassion in the midst of global conflict. June 13th, 1943, Camp Forest, Tennessee. The morning sun casts long shadows across the neatly lined barracks. Corporal Heinrich Miller wakes to the soft creak of the wooden floors beneath him. The air is thick with humidity, carrying the scent of pine and freshly swept grounds. Around him, other prisoners stir, some still groaning from the early wake-up bell, their minds replaying the chaos of capture, while adjusting to the strange rhythm of life in captivity. Aufstehen, aufstehen, Heinrich mutters to himself, shaking off the remnants of sleep. Outside, the camp is already alive with motion. Guards patrol along gravel roads, their boots crunching in disciplined cadence. Trucks rumble past, delivering fresh produce from nearby Tennessee farms, eggs glinting in the sunlight, crates of potatoes and butter stacked high. The prisoners watch in awe, noting the stark contrast with the rations they had scavenged for months. Breakfast has become a ritual rather than a shock. Each morning, the mess hall is filled with the clang of trays, the hiss of frying pans, and the murmur of voices in a mix of German and broken English. Sergeant James Caldwell oversees the operation, moving with precision from stove to stove. "Come on, get it while it's hot," he calls, lifting a spatula as if orchestrating a symphony. For Heinrich, each plate, steak, eggs, bread, butter, is both sustenance and an alien form of civility. Beyond the mess hall, the camp functions with meticulous organization. POWs are assigned work details, laundry, groundskeeping, kitchen assistance, but these tasks are conducted under strict rules, far from the grueling, forced labor they anticipated. Heinrich is assigned to the gardens, tending rows of fresh vegetables that will eventually supplement the camp's meals. The work is exhausting in its own way, but it carries a rhythm, a sense of contribution rather than punishment. Yet life in Camp Forest is not without tension. Guards maintain constant surveillance, watchtowers looming over every barracks and field. Prisoners are acutely aware that one misstep, a joke, a whispered complaint, or a forbidden attempt to escape could result in solitary confinement. Despite the comfort of food and sanitation, the omnipresent authority serves as a reminder that they are still captives, and normalcy is bounded by barbed wire and armed men. Heinrich notices subtle interactions that reveal the human side of the Americans. A kitchen cook pauses to show a group of prisoners how to properly fry eggs without burning the edges. Another guard helps a prisoner reach a crate of tomatoes. These small acts, while not subverting the power structure, offer glimpses of a world built on order and civility. The contrast between these gestures and the brutal chaos of the front lines is almost surreal. Meals, in particular, are moments of quiet amazement. The prisoners discuss the quality of the food in hushed tones. "Steak again, and butter," whispers one, eyes wide with disbelief. Another shakes his head as he bites into a fresh egg, muttering, "Why ist das möglich? We've been starving for months." Each conversation underscores a psychological shift. These men are beginning to reconcile the dissonance between their expectations and reality. Evening brings the camp into a different rhythm. Lights flicker on inside the barracks, and the air grows cooler. Prisoners sit on wooden bunks, sometimes reading letters from home or writing their own, the smell of soap and polished floors filling the space. For Heinrich, these moments are a strange blend of relief and disorientation. He is fed, clean, and mostly safe, but the war still rages beyond the perimeter of the camp. Reminders carried on distant radio broadcasts or the occasional transient air raid alert. Despite this controlled environment, the cultural gap is stark. The POWs talk in rapid German, comparing their lives at the front with the conditions here. "You think they treat all soldiers like this?" asks one young private, disbelief still etched across his face. Heinrich shakes his head slowly. "No, never. Only here, in America." The realization dawns that the Geneva Convention, enforced meticulously at Camp Forest, is not just a formality. It is a tangible system that preserves dignity amid captivity. By nightfall, the camp settles into silence, punctuated by the occasional guard shift whistle or distant truck rumble. Heinrich lies on his bunk, reflecting on the day's meals, the gardens, and the small gestures of kindness. For the first time since capture, he feels a fragile sense of normalcy, a life structured not by shellfire, starvation, or chaos, but by routine, discipline, and unexpected generosity. Yet beneath this calm lies a persistent unease. The war is not over, and this relative safety is a temporary island in a vast sea of conflict. He closes his eyes, tasting the last flavors of steak and eggs on his tongue, the memory sharp and almost unreal. Camp Forest is a paradox, a place of captivity and freedom, deprivation and abundance, fear and civility. And for the men who walk its grounds, each meal becomes a daily reminder that survival is no longer solely about combat, but about understanding the strange, disciplined world into which they have been thrust. June 15th, 1943, Camp Forest, Tennessee. The sun beats down mercilessly on the gravel paths of Camp Forest, reflecting off the corrugated barracks and making the air shimmer with heat. Corporal Heinrich Miller walks alongside Hauptmann Karl Berger, both assigned to the morning work detail in the vegetable gardens. As they kneel to tend rows of tomatoes and cabbage, the conversation drifts inevitably back to food. Steak and eggs. Every morning, Karl mutters, shaking his head in disbelief. "We starve in Tunisia, in Africa, and they give this to us here?" Heinrich pauses to wipe his brow, the sweat stinging his eyes. "It is surreal," he admits, glancing at a freshly baked loaf of bread resting on a nearby crate, still warm from the morning bake. The taste of butter melting across the crust lingers in his memory. It is not just the abundance, but the ritual of preparation that unsettles them. Every meal is orderly, efficient, and consistent. There is no chaos, no improvisation, no rotting supplies or rationing panic. Each tray, each plate, each cut of meat is accounted for and delivered with care. For soldiers who have known hunger as a constant companion, this precision is almost offensive in its regularity. Evenings in the camp reinforce the dissonance. The prisoners gather in the mess hall for dinner, sharing conversations about the stark differences between life in American captivity and their own experiences on the front lines. "In North Africa, we fought over a piece of bread the size of a hand," Heinrich recalls, voice low. "Here, they argue over who gets the last slice of apple pie." Karl laughs, a short, incredulous sound that betrays both amusement and disbelief. The psychological impact extends beyond food. Guards, though armed, often treat the prisoners with unexpected courtesy. Roll call is precise but not cruel. Instructions are clear, without the shouting or brutality Heinrich remembers from German officers. Even the work details carry a paradoxical dignity. Gardening, cleaning, or assisting in the kitchens are tasks, yes, but they are structured, predictable, and conducted without humiliation. Lieutenant James Caldwell, overseeing the kitchen, notices the subtle shift in the POWs. "They're learning to trust the system," he mutters to a fellow officer, as he watches Heinrich carefully plate vegetables for his comrades. Not fear, not suspicion. Trust. That's the hardest thing for them to accept. And indeed, for Heinrich, every act of kindness or order feels suspicious at first, a psychological tug-of-war between expectation and reality. One afternoon, as the prisoners line up for lunch, a small group of younger soldiers whispers nervously about the luxury they are experiencing. "Do they want something from us? Is this a trick?" one asks, eyes darting at the guards. The seasoned men shake their heads. "No trick," Heinrich replies softly. "This is how they live. They have resources. They are organized. We are seeing a different world. Cultural shock is everywhere. POWs observe the cleanliness of the barracks, the regularity of medical inspections, and even the recreational facilities, baseball fields, small libraries, and occasional musical events. Heinrich, who had assumed captivity meant endless suffering, is forced to confront the possibility that a humane system can exist even in wartime. It is both a relief and a subtle humiliation. The contrast highlights the failures and limitations of the German military system they left behind. At night, the barracks settle into quiet murmurs. Soldiers lie on bunks, eating the last crumbs of bread or swapping letters. Some write to families, describing life at Camp Forest with cautious optimism. Others simply stare at the ceiling, replaying moments of the day. The sizzling steak in the morning, the clean uniforms of the guards, the orderly rows of vegetables. Every detail seems exaggerated, almost unreal, a constant reminder that their world has shifted dramatically in the span of a few days. For Heinrich, the experience ignites a slow transformation. Hunger is no longer a driving force. Suspicion slowly gives way to curiosity. He begins to note patterns, routines, and rules, understanding that survival here depends not on brute force but on compliance, observation, and eventually, adaptation. The abundant meals, once unbelievable, become anchors in a world that defies his prior assumptions. By the end of the week, the German POWs are more than fed. They are observing, learning, and processing a new reality. The abundance of food, the humane treatment, and the meticulous organization of the camp are all factors that begin to reshape their understanding of what war and captivity could mean. And in the quiet moments before sleep, as Heinrich traces the line of shadows across the barracks, he realizes that survival might now depend as much on understanding the American system as it once depended on bullets and courage. June 20th, 1943, Camp Forest, Tennessee. By the third week of captivity, the shock of abundance begins to settle into a cautious rhythm. Corporal Heinrich Miller moves with a measured stride along the gravel paths of the compound, no longer startled by the clatter of mess trays or the gleam of freshly polished boots. The initial incredulity of breakfast steak and eggs has become a strange, almost comforting normalcy. Yet beneath the routine lies a subtle undercurrent of unease. The prisoners are adapting, and adaptation carries its own weight. The morning roll call is precise. Prisoners line up in their assigned rows, the sun casting sharp angles across the barracks. Sergeant Caldwell walks the line, inspecting uniforms and nodding briefly at each man. There is discipline, but it is not intimidation. "Move to your work details," he calls, his voice steady, "and take your water." Heinrich notices how different this is from the rigid, punitive commands of German officers in North Africa. Here, authority is exercised with order, not cruelty, and it creates a strange sense of predictability. Work details have become central to daily life. Heinrich is now assigned to assist in the kitchen, peeling potatoes and slicing vegetables under the supervision of a cheerful American cook, Private First Class Walter Jenkins. The kitchen is a flurry of activity, steam hissing from pots, knives striking cutting boards in rhythmic precision, and the aroma of sizzling meat filling the air. Jenkins occasionally glances at Heinrich, offering small tips on knife technique or cooking timing. And Heinrich, though initially suspicious, begins to absorb these lessons. In the mess hall, POWs gather for meals, conversations growing louder as they compare their past hardships with current provisions. "We starved in Africa," says one, "and now look at this: eggs, bread, meat, even fruit." Another adds, "It is like living in a different world." The laughter is nervous, almost guilty, reflecting the dissonance between expectation and reality. Heinrich quietly nods, realizing that these shared experiences are forging an uneasy camaraderie among the prisoners. Beyond sustenance, recreation has become a vital coping mechanism. Baseball games are held in the afternoons, small libraries offer novels in both English and German, and occasional music performances provide a semblance of normal civilian life. For Heinrich, the baseball games are initially strange. Players in khaki and POWs in mismatched uniforms chase the ball with competitive fervor. Yet the simplicity of the game, the sound of laughter, and the cheers, even when mingled with the occasional guard's watchful gaze, offer a relief from the constant mental strain of captivity. Medical inspections and hygiene routines are another surprise. Every week, POWs line up for dental and medical checkups. Medics meticulously examine each man, treating minor injuries, infections, and general health concerns. It is a stark contrast to the improvisational and often insufficient care they received in the field. Heinrich finds himself reflecting on the efficiency and organization of the American military medical system, an element of care that is both practical and psychological, reinforcing a sense of security that the front lines never provided. Interactions with the guards evolve as well. Heinrich notices small gestures, a nod, a shared cigarette break, a warning to avoid the sun during the hottest hours of the day. The guards are firm, yet there is an underlying current of mutual observation and, in rare moments, respect. Heinrich begins to understand that navigating this environment requires attentiveness, compliance, and subtle awareness of human behavior, a skill that will prove as important as any on the battlefield. By the end of the month, what once seemed impossible, regular hot meals, clean barracks, access to medical care and recreation, has become routine. The prisoners have internalized the rhythm of Camp Forest, learning to anticipate meal times, respect schedules, and adapt to the rules. Yet Heinrich remains quietly reflective. Each steak, each egg, each loaf of bread is not merely sustenance. It is a symbol of a world that exists beyond the immediate terror of war, a world where discipline, logistics, and humanity intersect. Heinrich lies on his bunk at night, listening to the soft murmur of the other prisoners, the distant hum of trucks, and the occasional whistle from a guard on patrol. Sleep comes easier now, though the mind remains alert, parsing the paradox of abundance within captivity. For these men, survival has shifted from brute endurance to adaptation, from hunger to understanding, and from fear to the cautious negotiation of a foreign system of order and care. July 1st, 1943, Camp Forest, Tennessee. The early morning sun filters through the pine trees, casting dappled light across the gravel paths of the camp. Corporal Heinrich Müller walks slowly toward the mess hall, pausing to watch younger prisoners laughing as they play a clumsy game of baseball. The scene is almost surreal, so far removed from the battlefields of Tunisia and the endless desert heat. Heinrich feels a strange mixture of relief, disbelief, and a subtle shame for finding comfort in captivity while his comrades are still embroiled in fighting thousands of miles away. Breakfast is served as always: steak, eggs, fresh bread, and coffee. Heinrich sits with Karl Berger and a few others, the aroma filling the air and mingling with the scent of pine from outside. As he eats, he reflects on the months since their arrival. The initial shock of abundance has faded, replaced by routine and a grudging acceptance that life in Camp Forest operates under rules entirely different from the chaos of war. It is not just the food that lingers in memory. It is the organization, the predictability, and the subtle respect extended by the Americans. Heinrich recalls the moment Sergeant Caldwell offered a piece of advice on frying eggs perfectly, the careful attention of the medics during inspections, and even the brief moments of conversation with guards who occasionally shared small jokes or stories. Each encounter, each structured task, became a lesson in patience, observation, and adaptation. Yet beneath the surface, Heinrich is aware of a profound psychological shift. The contrast between front lines and captivity, deprivation and abundance, fear and measured care, leaves a mark on the prisoner's understanding of war and humanity. The Germans who once believed that surrender meant humiliation now experience dignity, and this reshapes their perception of the enemy. It is a paradox. They are prisoners, yet treated better than many soldiers they left behind in Europe. Throughout the camp, small acts continue to reinforce this complex reality. Prisoners help in the kitchens, tend gardens, and participate in recreational activities. Each action teaches them not only skills, but also patience, cooperation, and the quiet rhythm of daily life in an ordered society. Heinrich observes the younger POWs laughing, sharing food, and cautiously building friendships, realizing that even in captivity, human resilience finds a way to flourish. Letters from home arrive sporadically, and the prisoners read them with a mix of hope and melancholy. News from Europe is filtered and distant. Battles continue, comrades suffer or die, and the war rages on. Yet Camp Forest, with its clean barracks, organized routines, and plentiful meals, offers a temporary sanctuary. The steak and eggs of each morning become a symbol of that sanctuary, a fragile, tangible connection to normalcy and sustenance in a world otherwise defined by destruction. For Heinrich, the lessons extend beyond survival. He begins to understand the power of logistics, the impact of discipline and structure, and the importance of treating humans with dignity, even amid conflict. These insights contrast sharply with the harsh lessons of combat and the often brutal conduct of the front lines. The Americans' meticulous adherence to the Geneva Convention and their investment in POW welfare reveal a strategic and moral framework that challenges his previous assumptions about enemies and allies. As the sun sets over Camp Forest, painting the barracks in warm orange light, Heinrich sits quietly on his bunk, gazing out through the barred windows. The distant chirp of cicadas blends with the soft footsteps of guards on patrol. He reflects on the paradox of war, the destruction beyond the camp and the abundance within it, the brutality of battle and the civility of captivity. Every meal, every routine, every small kindness is a lesson etched deeply into the consciousness of those who survive. For the German POWs, Camp Forest becomes more than a holding site. It becomes a crucible of psychological transformation. The steak and eggs each morning are not merely nourishment, they are a daily reminder that even in war, humanity can endure. They teach patience, adaptation, and the recognition that survival is as much about understanding systems, culture, and human behavior as it is about courage on the battlefield. And as Heinrich closes his eyes that night, the distant sounds of the camp fading into silence, he carries with him the memory of each structured meal, each polite gesture, and each small act of order and care. They are lessons that will remain long after the war ends, shaping his understanding of both human resilience and the unexpected forms that mercy and discipline can take in the midst of global conflict.